Yeah, same thing with what's her face, the Hawaiian, who's now like there were a lot of Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
I like Ghastly Tubbard. That's good.
I think I started saying something. Yeah, that.
Ghastly Tubbard is fantastic. That sounds like something you'd call the fat dude at the back of the bus. Here we are, Abe Cast Iron Brains, a podcast that has found that the world might actually be worse than you think it is if you're just sort of generally following the news. My name is Bob, sitting across the way from my good friend and co-host. That's Abe. How you doing tonight, Abe?
Doing well, Bob.
Yeah, here we are. Lori's here too. How you doing tonight, Lori?
Oh, I don't know. I think bad.
Lori thinks bad. Tonight is Monday, February 24th, 2025. I was going to write a semi-lengthy opening essay today as it relates to the goings-on in the Middle East and in Ukraine and Russia and the American shift away from what has been the global order and the horrors to come, no doubt. I didn't have time. I had to do other bullshit today, and so
You didn't fix the toilet, though.
I didn't fix the toilet.
What did you do?
Are you sending me an Elon Musk-esque email demanding
No, I'm
to know
asking you
the
to
5
your
things
face.
I did today?
No, I just want to know what you
I
did
had a
if
kid
it wasn't
sick at
fixed.
home. I had to go to the doctor. I had to go pick up medicine for this sick kid. I had to deal with the daughter's science project that we're working on. I read a bunch of news. I had to
read
do
a bunch of
of
news. There it is.
I had to do a bunch of PTO-related nonsense, including send out a PTO-related email, and then just the usual silliness. I did my push-up routine and had a protein shake. Is that good enough? Can I keep my fucking job, such as it is?
Yes, you can keep your job.
Thank you very much. Anyway, the point here being that you're all spared that depressing 1,000 words or so that it likely would have been, 3, 4, 5 minutes, who knows. So congratulations. You don't have to listen to me be dire about things. Abe, you have a good weekend?
Yeah, very nice and quiet weekend. Spent time with the family and some friends, and did nothing else.
Oh, well, good. I want to start before we get into the depressing stuff. Abe, you've sort of turned over a new leaf here recently as it comes to. You stopped predicting that old people were going to die, right? At one time, you were calling for the death of many olds.
I wasn't calling for it. How dare you?
All right,
I was
but you used to be a little bit more cavalier with the way that you would talk about the old folks.
I was just saying, I see it implausible that these old people will make it out this calendar year. I'm not wishing for it. I'm just thought, I'm doing the math.
All right, I'm going to let the audience decide, and it's going to be based on almost a tone of voice thing more than anything else. But on the Biffler, which is your other podcast that you do, or one of your other podcasts, the one that you do without me.
That's right.
Over on the Biffler, hard to find if you search up the Biffler. Although, to be fair, it's hard to find if you search up the Buffer. So maybe I'll, because there's so many other podcasts that either have the Buffer as their name or as episode titles, or it's just like an incredibly common name. So it's if you go to Spotify.com, for example, and just plug the Buffer into the search bar there. You have to go to podcasts, and then you have to scroll through like 30 or 40 things before you get to the one that's actually called the Buffer.
Right.
So
it's precisely why we chose that name.
Yeah, just utterly unfindable.
Yes.
It's good. Anyway, so I was listening to the Biffler, and what I noticed is that it seems like if you get a couple of drinks deep, the thing that comes out of you are sort of your old ways when it comes to delighting in the imminent demise of famous old people. So I just want to play this clip here from the show and see if anybody else agrees with me.
The All-Star Weekend was a shitty, I think, moment for the NBA fraternity because how bad everything was. But I think Hubie Brown and how the NBA kind of coalesced as this fraternity of like, hey, man, you're one of us. You were in the inn and you were one of the legends. Like how they coalesced around Doris Burke about these other people who have done it forever. You have any thoughts on Hubie Brown?
You think he makes it to 26?
Yes. Oh, wait, 26.
Discussing Hubie Brown, the longtime National Basketball Association commentator. He's like in his early 90s, I
Yeah,
believe.
he
right?
is almost dead. I don't understand.
He's hanging him up after all this time, and I'm gonna play the clip again for us and also for the audience. But listen to the naked delight.
Yeah, glee is what I hear.
Just glee in your voice when you ask if he's going to make it to 26.
You have any thoughts on the Hubie Brown?
You think he makes it to 26?
There's not even the least bit of breath. There's not any space for thought between your co-host there, Urban, asking you, "Do you have any thoughts on Hubie Brown?" And it's just immediate. It's right to.
Think he might die.
How soon do you think he's going to die?
Hubie Brown was born the year Hitler took office. He is old. Come on. This is the stoppage time, if you were to use soccer terminology, of his life. I mean, at any moment.
Abe, you are one sick fuck. I think that's what we've established here.
By the way, let the record show, I did not say anything about that. The Pope, he's on his last legs.
I didn't say anything about the Pope until I immediately brought it up 5 minutes into the podcast, apropos of literally nothing.
What do you mean? We're talking about old people, about the...
He's been in hospital for like a week now or something. He's got double pneumonia and an infection in both lungs or something. Not long for this. World.
We talk about movies and such at the end of the podcast, but do you think the movie Conclave is going to get a little bump if he were to die around the same time?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
They already locked in the votes. I don't know how that works.
I'm always fascinated when the Pope kicks it. And cool Pope 2 going down. You wonder where the Catholic Church will go next. They had this sort of progressive, forward-thinking Pope this time, which is quite a turn from the more conservative guy we had last time around, and one wonders which direction they will go from here. Probably not, as Conclave suggested, spoilers, in the direction of a transgender individual.
Yes.
Probably
or maybe,
not
but that individual was fairly young. Maybe you think they go like, 50-something?
The problem is you cannot afford to make a mistake with a 50-year-old Pope, right? Because they live these easy lives. They likely live 40. Like if you put a 45-year-old in there, now you got a Pope for fucking 50 years. I don't know if you want. What if it's the wrong choice?
You don't want to welcome that sort of stability. I mean, like you don't want like a third Pope to pass in like 12 years or however long it's been.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, Godspeed to the Pope. Anybody needs the thoughts and prayers? It's probably not him.
You say Godspeed when someone's dying?
I mean,
seems.
Yeah, come on, Bob. Show a little sensitivity here.
The Catholics, you got purgatory potentially waiting for you when you die.
There's no way the Pope is going to purgatory. I mean,
you don't know what's in that man's closet.
No, I think there should be like a rule in this purgatory. Like you get some accepted if
you're the Pope, you're good.
All right, let's talk about the awful news of the week.
That was the light stuff. Good.
Where to start? Something that we talked about last week that I couldn't quite get my words wrapped around the thoughts properly, so I had trouble expressing the idea. But I was trying to get to this notion that Donald Trump doesn't, or use the notion that Donald Trump doesn't believe in institutions and doesn't really believe in nations in the way that institutions and nations have mattered in the last 70 or 80 years. He instead believes in sort of a great men of power theory of how the world works, and that goes for his business dealings, and it goes for how he thinks governments should interact with one another, which is that governments don't matter, that agreements made between countries don't matter, arrangements made between countries, if they are not immediately benefiting the individual or the individual's perceived interests, then they don't matter. And all that matters is two personalities in a room and the power exchange that happens there. It is impossible, I think. I legitimately cannot imagine watching the Sunday shows and not being infuriated And I know that that's a failure of imagination on my part because there are many people who like what Donald Trump is doing, right? He is enjoying an approval rating that is not great, but certainly maintains its remarkable steadiness in the high 40s right now. It's coming down, but it is underwater at the moment. But it is equally impossible to imagine a floor for his approval that is below 39 or 40%, right? Like
same thing as the first term, right?
Right. It's just utterly inconceivable that those who support him could turn on him at this point, and it's almost a function of the contrarianism that has been built into the modern conservative by the last couple of generations, in part by the Rush Limbaugh types, but also by almost everyone who complains about the mainstream media. And it's such a tick of conservatism to complain about, like it's almost if I said that it's half of their identity, I don't think I'm overstating it. They pay lip service to ideas of limited government and civil liberties and whatever else, but the thing that motivates them, the thing that they get upset about, the thing that they talk about all the fucking time is media bias more than anything else, as far as I can tell. And so anything that the media has to say, they will automatically be against. And that, as has long been the case, that which makes the chattering classes aghast is that which delights the Trump supporters. And so all Trump has to do, whether it's last weekend or the weekend before, so over a week ago now, Trump tweets over the weekend something like, it's basically if the president does it, then it's not against the law in Nixonian terms, except it's far more bald than that, where he says a man who saves his country breaks no law or something like that. It's some bastardization of an apocryphal Napoleon quote, I believe, is what he was attempting to reference there, which is, first of all, it's the Bane, or not Bane, Tom Hardy. It's the Mad Max thing, the GIF that goes around. That's bait, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like it's always the case that Trump is baiting, but that one in particular, where just sort of randomly on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, he just tweets out, "He who saves his country cannot break the law." Like that's clearly bait. Like he's clearly trying to get people all riled up and to get mad about something, and so that his supporters will rally behind him just by virtue of the fact that people are upset. I think it is among the most dead end, this reflexive anti-whatever the establishment or whatever the institution or whatever the mainstream is defending or whatever they hold sacrosanct or whatever they're saying is good, you automatically say is bad. Whatever they're saying is bad, you automatically say is good. It is among the most dead-end, like utterly anti-ideological, anti-intellectual, anti-everything rational, and instead it's just I can't get away from the phrase dead end, right? And it results in Elon Musk giving what appears to possibly be a Nazi salute. It results in people being unwilling to say, we're not going to annex Canada. It results in, this past weekend, Trump administration officials being utterly unwilling to acknowledge that Russia was the aggressor in the current war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine, right? Not quite coming out and saying Ukraine started the war and it's their fault, the way that Trump did last week. But being unwilling to say Russia is the aggressor here, being unwilling to simply state that obvious and true fact, simply because you know it's going to piss off the media, and if it pisses off the media, then it's good. And if it satisfies, if it kowtows to the media, then it's bad. Like, how is that, aside from just being like, and this is
Because all they want to do is be assholes.
right. So I was accused at one time, I believe in my late teens or possibly early 20s. I don't remember when this conversation took place, to make this into a personal anecdote type of situation. I think it must have been freshman. Like I must have been 18 or 19 years old. And so the charge was let's say it probably carried more water than I wanted to give it credit for, but also it was unfair. The charge was that I was just a contrarian, that I just cared, I just liked to be contradictory, that I didn't actually believe anything or think anything, that I was just a contrarian. This was a charge leveled by my best friend growing up, Brian, his mother, to me, and it largely related to questions about religion, I believe, as I recall.
It had to have been a Catholic thing.
Yeah, this was around...
If you were talking to Brian's mom?
A question of faith. And it made me super fucking mad to have, like, this thing that I had spent a great deal of time thinking about, the question of God and, you know, these matters of faith and whether or not the Catholic Church was a force for good in the world or not. It made me mad that all of this thinking and the sincere moral reasoning that I had done on this subject, like, this is something that was important to me, so I spent a lot of time thinking and writing about it. To have that dismissed as simply being a contrarian, it probably hurt me also, obviously, right, to be dismissed in that way. But, like, also that is sort of a personality aspect that exists within me, right? Like,
it's that stupid is it Aristotle or the other one? Plato.
I don't know where you're going, so.
It's the thing where we can't just have a simple thing. It has to be like, well, but what about this thing? It's Plato, but who does Plato talk as?
Socrates?
Socrates, yeah. It's that thing that it draws you to philosophy. It's that, like, always questioning something, never just going like, oh, well, I guess you never know.
Yeah, I think that there's
that can read as contrarian, that you won't just go, oh yeah.
There's great value in asking questions, and being a contrarian can be a useful way towards greater understanding. But to have everything, to have that all balled up into, oh, you're just a contrarian, so you don't actually sincerely believe the things that you're saying. You're simply essentially you're simply a reactionary, right? Like that's sort of what you're saying to someone when you try to dismiss them as a contrarian. Anyway, it's a long and stupid and personal anecdote way of saying that there is something profoundly dead end about always simply reacting to things in the negative, is right, saying if A, then Z, right? No matter what. That's just sort of what it feels like when I watch these Republicans who go to bat for the Trump administration on the news programs and reading their comments in news stories these days.
Agitation is the point. Sometimes it feels like that's all there is. Like the way people kind of view it is if certain people or certain segments of society are agitated, you're doing something right, because some conclusion has been reached about those groups of people. And so it is a frustratingly effective strategy, because all you have to do is just ruffle the feathers by posting some memes or saying something outlandish. Inevitably, people are going to react to that rationally, right? Like, what the fuck? What, king? Like, what are you talking about, right? And then you have that response. Like, you're now agitated, and then people who are watching, they're like, oh, they're upset. This must mean that the guy that I like is on the right track. And to your point about applying scrutiny, if you're doing it constructively, it can help better an argument, right, or a position. So if you apply scrutiny and you poke holes in in order to achieve some positive good, then that's a good thing. But you can apply scrutiny to that dead end you speak of, right? If you're destructively applying scrutiny where it doesn't belong, or you have really no objective other than just to throw obstacles at something, it all depends on what your intentions are. And right now, any sort of agitation is good. And what's also frustrating is that in the us versus them dynamic, if you are, let's say you are the one that's cheering all of this on, right? You are now in a compromised position, because eventually there'll be something you don't like, right? And as soon as you don't like that thing, you are now them, right? You have no credibility to say, no, it's different because I'm the one that's raising this point. You bristling at sort of any agitation, you have now become them. So it is a very effective way to go about things.
Right. And what's worse about this us versus them dynamic is that it's not just we are the people on this side with this opinion and they are the people on that side with that opinion and we have to coexist in this pluralistic environment. No, it's the thing that makes this so punishing is that the other side is regarded as subhuman. They're regarded as not being worthy of any consideration whatsoever. Right. So when I'm an obnoxious 19-year-old talking about the Catholic Church and its failings, I'm hoping in some weird way to find the humanity in the people who did these horrible things and to understand why people who I think are moral actors in the world can abide such awful immoral acts, right? And it's like, no, like I'm not being a contrarian. I'm trying to identify how you can or how a person is able to rationalize, on the one hand, being a good moral person who cares and loves and is a human being with these monstrous acts, right? And that's my project. This other project, if they're against it, then I'm for it. That sort of thing simply means that you have fully denied or have no respect for the process by which a person could come to the conclusions or to sincerely hold their beliefs, or you simply don't believe that they are fully human in the same way that you are.
Right.
And I think that sounds like a lot, probably, but I also think it's way easier to imagine that the they are somehow not as human now because we don't interact with real human beings nearly as often as we used to, right?
Yeah.
In our bogus future, so much of what we consume is chosen for us or chosen by the algorithm or chosen by us in ways that we don't understand, right? So like just by your scrolling habits, you have chosen the media that you're going to see. And overwhelmingly, when you think about your interactions with other people, they are digital, they are false, they are over text message, they are otherwise somehow mediated by this phone. And it becomes this, well, whatever. I don't want to get into that whole conversation because it's something that we've been through a million times. But when you are interacting with this device instead of with another human being, it is just so much easier to dismiss that other, to dismiss the humanity of the other person. And it's not, you're not consciously doing it. It's just hard to fathom that there is another human being on the other side there in the way that it is super easy to fathom when you can sit across the table from someone and look them in the eye. Right? Like there's just no denying that.
I think the two traits, once you lose these two, which is humility and empathy, right? Like in using some sort of technology to...
But sorry to interrupt, but why would you have empathy for somebody who's just a series of white dots on your fucking phone?
That's true,
like that,
yeah.
That would be a weird anti-evolutionary trick that you've convinced your brain to do. There's no reason for you to have empathy for whatever weird creature exists inside your fucking phone.
Right. So that's why I think like at least having one of those two, because you're right. If you using social media or these smartphones, it's not the best environment for empathy because you don't see anybody. It's just all, you're just pressing buttons. But like once those two things go, all the other stuff that you mentioned, the dehumanizing, the lesser than, the other than, becomes more likely, right? And so as long as you're tethered to empathy and humility, whatever positions you may have, you're on good, solid ground. But once you remove those two, then the worst aspects of humans becomes possible and likely.
And if you get online and you make fun of somebody who's having the worst day in their life because they lost their job after they moved across the country to take a government job, and they're a probationary employee who, by the way, they've been there for 18 months, but they're still a probationary employee, right? So they've upended their life and changed everything about their life. They just had a fucking kid a year ago, but you go on the internet and you dunk on them because they're not a real fucking human being to you. But the thing that feels real is when 1,000 yes men come behind you and pat you on the back for being such a fucking flaming pile of shit, right? Because you went and you took a piss on this fellow human being because they don't seem like a human being, but the thing that felt real was when 1,000 people gave you the thumbs up for doing so.
Right. And sometimes I wonder, like, is that what some people are in it for? Because like you can make, I'm sure the politicians on the Sunday morning shows will say it's a unnecessary thing to do to save some money or whatever, right? But you can still show some empathy and say it sucks, and maybe we can retrain you. Or there's ways to go about things in a human way. But others who take kind of delight in this sort of thing, is that all they're in it for? Just like this crabs in a bucket kind of, my life is not going too well, so fuck you. Like, is that what's driving some of this animus? Like, cause
Also, by the way, your life is probably going just fine, which is what drives me most nuts. Like, I know everybody has their fucking problems, and this is becoming a boring thing for me to repeat every week. Right. But look around. Like, things are actually fucking fine. Right. And all of the fucking complaining that you're doing is largely an absurdity. It's all made up. You're fucking fine.
Exacerbated also by your use of your phone all the time and right. viewing random shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have Elon Musk going on stage this weekend, literally wielding a massive chainsaw and saying that this is the good work that he's doing.
What was that Camacho guy doing? Was he like a blowtorch? What did the guy from the Idiocracy have? Like the Macho Camacho character?
Yeah, he had a flamethrower or something.
Yeah, I just when I saw that image, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, you're just becoming like a cartoon at this point.
Yeah, and the dumbness of it is like the point almost. Like,
yes.
he would gleefully post a GIF of Camacho doing that, right? Like he would glee, like if he could get a Terry Crews image, like he would delight in that comparison at this point.
And I mean, I'm sure that gets a lot of traction online and in person. People like if you're of that mindset, you're gonna get a good laugh out of these weird kind of move. So I guess that he's encouraged by this sort of behavior.
He's tweeting like 100 times a day at all hours and barely sleeping and obviously on drugs all of the time.
Maybe he'll die.
Like I don't get the appeal at all.
What are the odds on him dying before Trump dies? That might be a fun bet to make, just for fun.
I mean, men with that access to those amounts of resources don't typically just die, but I guess if you're not sleeping, and
if you're just trying to throw $5 at something, it's not on my app.
All right, I do want to get into the specifics here a little bit in this Trump Zelensky sort of falling out and the move towards Russia in terms of the sort of a Trump hug. I think I've seen it described as the Trump hug of Vladimir Putin once again. Metaphorically speaking, of course, not literally. Trump tweeted or truthed out the following. This is a big, long one, but I think it's such a pure Trump online distilled that I think it's worth reading and looking at, really, also because of the capitalization norms.
Well, you'd have to put it on the thing because I'm not gonna do that.
Trump posted, "Think of it, a modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed while the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization in that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. A dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues. ...
Question. Is that how you spell Zelensky? Like, what's with the extra Y?
With the bonus Y? Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
It goes both ways.
Okay.
It's not quite a Muammar Gaddafi situation where that was spelled legitimately like 6 different ways.
Ukrainian's a weird language.
Yeah.
Like, a girl at my work is Ukrainian, and I literally cannot pronounce her name. My mouth won't do it.
That was a long post of which almost nothing in which there's almost no truth content, like literally. Like there's almost nothing in it that is actually true, and also is very specifically.
I mean, the objective, just to be clear, of a post like this is to frame the narrative, right? And so, like, even though it's filled with things that are not supported by the facts, people who are supporters of Trump will take this information as generally true. America was taken advantage of. The previous president was very lax and did not have any sort of guarantees. And Europe is not doing enough, even though it's nearer to their border than it is to our border. So, like, that framing is going to be accepted as generally true. And that's what the point of this sort of messaging is.
I mentioned... I said to Lori as we were watching the news shows on Sunday morning, as we do or I do my like power watch through all 4 or 5 of them at this point, just begging for like 30 seconds in which somebody makes any amount of sense is all I'm really looking for. Abe, you were talking about how what Trump says in this post is, though largely fact-free, it feels directionally or sort of emotionally true, or will be taken as such by the Trump rabble and those who defend him. And what I was saying to Lori watching all of these shows was it's remarkable how he just, and it's been going on for over a decade at this point, but he just says whatever. And then no matter what it is, and whether it's circling an area of the Gulf of Mexico on a weather map and saying that a hurricane is in fact going in a different direction than it is going in, or whether it's the crowds at the inauguration in 2017, whatever it is, whatever utterly fanciful, fact-free nonsense it is that he's most recently said, like, for example, Ukraine started the war and Zelensky is a dictator, they then have to spend all of their time teasing out the truth, massaging the things that Trump has said into something that approaches respectability or something that approaches reality. And that's the entire project of people who have to talk about Donald Trump, right? It's very rarely is it, here are the 7 words in a row that Donald Trump said that are absolutely true, need no modifiers. We don't need to, like, I'm just going to repeat the thing that Trump said because it's true and I agree with it. It is always a 10-minute long digression or attempt to massage the thing that Donald Trump said into something that is directionally true or is directionally true enough to give them some ground to stand on.
I wonder if some of them are doing that because they think at least inside the tent and I can maybe move the president's view into alignment of what my thinking. So, like, it doesn't do any good for me to just say flat out that the president is wrong on something. The issue of Russia is interesting because there are a lot of hardliners in the GOP in the Senate. Lindsey Graham, Tom Tillis, among them. There's a few others. It's not just a couple. And I think Tillis went on the Senate floor last week and made this very strong case against Russia, right? And so it seems to
Tillis is so far, I think, like the only, with the exception of like Mitch and the lady Republicans, who have been hesitant to fully support all of Trump's nominees and don't constantly go to bat for him. Right. Tillis is sort of like fourth in line there in terms of something approaching a correct response to nonsense that Trump says.
Right, but I wonder if like the others are worried that doing so is going to put you on the outs, right? And so like, this seems to be like a demonstration of power in some cases with Trump, where like this is the reality and you have to acquiesce in however way you need to agree to my line of thinking. And if you don't, you're one of them, right? And so
that would be fine if if he had a theory of anything, right?
Right.
To some extent, he just sort of accidentally says things.
Right.
Right. Like, I know he composed this long post, but an argument can be made that he just sort of stumbled into saying, because he spent too much time talking to Vlad on the phone, he just sort of accidentally said out loud, Zelensky is a dictator who started the war.
Right.
Right. Because that's just sort of the water he's swimming in after a 3-hour conversation with Putin. So it's not like it's this thought out idea of how the world works. And he's like, you better get in line with the way I see things. It's like, no, I took a dump back there, and we're going to describe the dump in terms different than it actually presents.
Right.
And you're all going to have to be on my side. And it's not like it was an intentional dump. It's just, I happen to have, I doubled the fiber supplement this morning, and I have loose bowels because I'm a fucking 80-year-old man who only eats hamburgers.
Right. And here we are. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now,
and now that's the world, right?
And that's
like,
but earlier we're talking about like the lack of empathy, and sometimes people are in making drastic cuts or austerity to trim the deficit or some other larger reason, right? And sometimes people are just there just for the cruelty, and I think like in many cases Trump's points a lot of the time is just a demonstration of power. So there doesn't need to be a larger plan, right? So like if he says this, if he takes a shit somewhere, it's just to demonstrate his power by you saying that it's not shit or eating the shit or whatever, right? The only thing that matters is a demonstration of that power.
Right, because all that matters is that he said it, and now everyone has to defend it. It doesn't matter that it has no connection to reality.
Right.
It doesn't matter that it is, in fact, this sort of amoral at best, or I think pretty plainly, wildly immoral understanding of the way that the world is, right? To say that a country that was invaded by its richer, larger neighbor and is attempting to be wiped off the map because the aggressor country doesn't believe that it should exist, right? It doesn't believe that it's an actual place. I want to expand the conversation a little bit beyond just being horrified by what Donald Trump has done. Although I do think that it is awful. You can find that everywhere, right? There are a billion op-eds explicating precisely what is so monstrous about Donald Trump saying Zelensky is a dictator who started this war. By all means, go read them, and they're true and good. I think it is worth pointing out that the reason that we're in this boat at all, to some extent, is
Zelensky.
Is a result of Ukraine. Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons back in the 1990s, right? Part of a larger deal is the Budapest Memorandum or what have you. 2 or 3 countries said, we're going to give up the Soviet nukes that were left behind at the fall of the Soviet Union in an act of non-proliferation, right? In an attempt to make the world a better and safer place. We are going to give up these weapons that we have access to as a result of the Soviets leaving them behind and the geographic reality of our borders now. And they're going to say, because of that, we want some amount of security guarantees that Russia promises that they're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I think there's like 5 or 6 bullet points in the Budapest Memorandum that Russia, the U.S., the U.K. were all signatories to. And I think some other European countries, to a lesser extent, were also signed on to it. It's not quite Article 5 in NATO type situation, right, where if an attack against any NATO country is considered an attack against the whole and therefore will be responded to as such. But it was supposed to guarantee Ukrainian sovereignty, right? And Russia violated that in spectacular fashion in 2014 when it annexed Crimea. And the Russian so-called defense of this is to say that the Ukraine that existed in 2014 is not the Ukraine that was a signatory to the Budapest Memorandum because of the revolution that happened that turned Ukraine into some other country, right? So Russia says that's all null and void, and we're going to go take over the situation there, which is a bullshit rationalization of Russian imperialism and expansionism. And instead of reacting to that as a violation of an important red line, Barack Obama didn't, right? He just said, he wagged his finger and said, you shouldn't have been doing that. That's very bad. But we didn't do anything about it, right? And I'm not saying that there was necessarily something that ought to have been done. Should we have gone to fucking active war with Russia over what happened then? I don't know. Good night, children. As I was saying, not to say that we should have necessarily gone to war, but that was violative of an international treaty that Putin then, he didn't pay any fucking price in in a serious way. Were there sanctions, with economic price to some extent? Yeah, sure. But the Budapest Memorandum largely wasn't worth the paper it was written on, as it turns out, because Ukraine thought that they had guarantees of sovereignty through the UK and the US and other signatories, and as it turns out, they did not. And to go even bigger picture than that, look at what we saw during the Biden administration as it relates to both Israel and Ukraine. And on the one hand, it seemed like, especially at the start, Joe Biden rhetorically very much had Israel's back after October 7th. But that faded in just a few months as the political situation here in the United States became less favorable to him being quite so vociferously pro-Israel. The administration was very quick to criticize anything that they saw as sort of sloppy display of too much aggression as Israel tried to wage this war to exterminate Hamas in Gaza. And it played out in much the same way in Ukraine when it comes to the U.S. response, which is Zelensky in Ukraine would ask for A, and Biden and the Biden administration would say, well, how about C, and how about in 6 months?
Right.
And then 6 months would come, and they would give them something like B. Right, they'd give them something in between, but instead of giving them everything that they needed, and does Trump exaggerate by a great deal? This $350 billion number is just pulled entirely out of his ass. Right, it's actually, I think, 175 billion was the number, and as I've said very recently on the show, even that, nearly half of that money stays in the United States and is paid directly to U.S. defense contractors, and a lot of the rest of the money is guaranteed in terms of lend-lease money that's going to come back to the U.S. Down the line anyway. So it's not like this has been an entirely altruistic endeavor by a sucker United States. But we didn't do what needed to be done to give Ukraine everything that they needed to defend themselves and to possibly beat Russia, in part because we didn't think it was possible for Ukraine to withstand a Russian attack. The warnings that the Biden administration and the intelligence apparatus was releasing in the lead up to Russia's invasion, which, by the way, in classic fashion, Russia was denying was about to happen, right? The U.S. said they're about to invade Ukraine. It's going to be bad. They shouldn't do that. And Russia was like, no, you're making that shit up. And then they did it. And it's just very funny to hear Donald Trump.
I already did it.
Donald Trump making those sorts of fact-free assertions about the reality of the world in much the same way that Russian autocratic regime does. It's very dispiriting, actually, to have a United States president who talks in those terms. Anyway, the larger point that I'm making is that we didn't do Hamas is a legitimately monstrous organization, as it turns out. And you need look no further than the so-called release of hostages that was done over the course of the last week. And when I said at the top about how the world is actually much worse than you think it is, if you're only basically following the news, I didn't see coverage of the release of these Israeli hostages in the mainstream press, at least in a forward-facing sort of way. It's not like CBS primetime news got on there at 6:30 and explained exactly what happened. Right. At least not what I saw. The details of what happened last week with the release of I think it was 4 bodies, including 2 babies, right? A 4-year-old and a 9-month-old who were taken in the initial aftermath or on October 7th itself. Those bodies finally are released back to Israel in locked coffins with posters of the children and Netanyahu on the like a post like it's a display board or something, right? They're using the coffins, the custom built infant and child coffins of these dead children as propaganda tools in such a direct way that they're literally postering them with photographs, right? And then they're these masked Hamas militants, and it's this big dramatic production as they walk through the streets, parading them. It's not quite that Africans celebrating the funeral gif that goes around, right? It's much more solemn than that because it's much more fucking demonic and deranged than that, right? Like it's this awful thing, and inside those coffins are the executed remains of a baby and a 4-year-old, right? They locked them in this coffin, and then they gave the coffins back 3 years later, or 3 years into this, with the wrong keys, right? With keys that wouldn't even open the locked coffins.
Like a year and a half, by the way, not 3. The Ukraine war is 3 years. This is a year and change, right?
Sorry, right. October 7th, 23 is, so 18 months into this or whatever we are. Not even quite. Anyway, a monstrous display of inhumanity and like again, and I said this weekend, like I don't like to think of things in terms of good and evil, but when I hear an American president saying that Zelensky started this war, that Russia had no choice or whatever, that Zelensky is a dictator, like that strikes me as it's an almost evil thing to say, to tell a lie about the world in such a way, because it fundamentally confuses what should be a clear and obvious moral choice for the United States in terms of who we should be supporting and how we should be attempting to come to some sort of resolution here, in much the same way that the evil that is on display on the streets of Gaza as they parade dead babies through the streets. Like it's such an easy thing, you would think, for an American, any American, to understand what side we're supposed to be on. And in the meantime, we had idiots on college campuses and in major cities throughout this country waving the Hamas flag. People being utterly unwilling. They're so confused. Right. They're so legitimately morally confused. And maybe it's not their fault, right? Maybe they're victims of the modern age because they don't understand that you don't have to play these games where you have to go back and find the causal link and find the thing that caused the person. What you are doing when you are saying that Hamas is a result of there's a barbarism here that has been visited upon these people. You've now removed all agency from them, right? You're saying that they have become brutes in some way. That the brutal act that they display as a result of brutalization that has been done to them, and they cannot be held responsible for their actions. That is dehumanizing. You are doing the bad thing now. You are doing the thing where you've robbed them of responsibility and agency and humanity, and it is shameful and it is disgusting. Like it is something that approaches, again, I don't like to say evil acts, but it approaches evil, and you're just legitimately confused about what is good and what is bad in the world. If you insist on playing this relativistic moral game of finding the bad in the step before and in the step before that, no. If you see that someone has executed a baby and locked it in a box and parades it through the streets with glee, they have done bad and they are not deserving of anything like your respect or your defense. Right. And that is what we needed to push back against. And I know it makes me sound like a monstrous neocon when you get to these sort of brass tacks at the end of things. But like the world is as the world is in some small part because we were unwilling to stand up for the things that we allegedly believe in. And I know it's not our business to be the policeman of the fucking world, but if the long game was to eventually give Zelensky the ATACMS and to eventually give Israel the ability to destroy Iranian air defenses and to take out Hezbollah and to slowly bleed Hamas, then why didn't we just fucking do it? Right? Why not just fucking shove all of our chips in, be honest about where we stand in the world, and be a leader on the world stage? And to have the result of that absolute ineffectual and cowardice on display in terms of the way America approaches the world, to have it be Donald Trump talking about how Russia was justified in what they've done here to some extent. Because if Zelensky is a dictator, if he's the one who started this war, then what does that say about Russia? It means we've spent the last 3 years on the wrong side of this in some sort of institutional way. Right. And I think that's an abhorrence.
I think what's unnerving about what's often characterized as evil, which I think is apt, is how the capacity is there for everyone to get there, even though that may be unnerving to say. Because like I would wonder, like, how do people arrive at Hamas is actually good or Ukraine actually started the war when there's evidence? This is not, there are some occasions where something happened a long time ago, you weren't there, or there's a lack of information, right? And so you kind of I would say there's an information vacuum sometimes, and people will fill it in with whatever, right? Because there's nothing there to substitute for, guesses and hypotheticals. But in the lead up to and I think today maybe the 3-year anniversary, or maybe we're pretty much close to the.
It was today, yeah.
So in the lead up to 3 years ago, the U.S. government was like unclassifying information, like images, to show the buildup, right? To undercut the argument by Russia at the time that they weren't doing any sort of invasion, right? They had no plans to invasion. There were so many people that were saying it is nonsense that this is happening, and then the U.S. Government would release information saying, look, they're there, they're building up, they have all of this stuff to suggest that an invasion is imminent, and then the invasion happens after the Olympics end, the Winter Olympics, right? And so this is 3 years ago, right? So the audience that Trump is speaking to were around 3 years ago, right? This is not 70 years ago, and this is a different audience you're, recontextualizing or just making things up about, right? So, like, how do you get people that knew what happened 3 years ago are now open to the idea that maybe that's not how things went down? And I think the problem is, what story do you subscribe to will dictate everything else. And so going back to the Hamas thing, if you subscribe to the notion that there are the big imperialist or strong countries versus weak, if you have that sort of dynamic worldview, like they're strong and they're weak. And so like I'm always on the side of the weak fighting back against the strong. If you look at it from that dynamic, you somehow find yourself in alignment with a like out and out, like they're not even hiding it, like an out and out like extremist terrorist group that will stoop to anything to accomplish their goals, right? So how do you find a college-age kid?
These are Death Eaters. Like it sounds
but it's
silly,
like how
but
everyone
it's Harry
relates.
Potter shit.
Right.
These are the Death Eaters.
Right.
These are the people that worship death.
Right.
And you cannot condemn them.
Right. And
But it's the people. It's what Abe said. Everybody who watches Star Wars thinks that they're on the side of the rebels,
right.
no matter what their affiliation is. Like we're the little guy, we're the good guys.
So it's weird. Like people identify with that, and then they'll apply it. However, so it's like there seems to be like so the problem I have with evil acts, like people are capable of supporting evil when it supports some larger thing. So the error seems to be like that worldview is inherently flawed because you can see how it could lead you astray, right? Like if you say, okay, well, that strategy worked with South Africa, right? Apartheid, the weak and the strong, and they're pushing back, or any other examples you can point to where that dynamic you could apply that thinking to, but you can't apply it in every situation.
Not everything is the civil rights movement in the United States, you stupid motherfuckers.
Right. And so like it's and also and I think I've said this a million times, this weird offsetting penalty thinking, atrocity does not give you a license to commit atrocity, right? So if you believe somebody did an atrocity against you, like people think like this is now I have the license to commit atrocity, because any atrocity stands on its own. Any sort of like evil act is still evil, right? Like there isn't a way around that. And so like evil will just beget evil. So I don't even know what the end game is. But there seems to be like some sort of excusing of certain behavior. Like, well, they didn't start it, or they're so weak. What else could they do? They can't fight in a conventional, war. It has to be this asymmetrical do whatever thing, right? So like there's always some justification. And so there needs to be some way of like breaking that thought pattern to say like just write down what you're supporting and then go to sleep and then wake up and then like read the thing and then see if you actually still believe that, because like what you're believing is not actually true. I mean, like, it doesn't make sense. I don't think the people who support a lot of this evil stuff are actually, I mean, I don't know what the distinction would be, but like, they're not evil, but they somehow found themselves supporting a regime that is just evil. There's no other like redeeming quality. Right? I don't know if they just pass around turkeys every now and again, but like their whole thing is to commit atrocities. That's the whole thing. And if they gain more power, more atrocities, right? So like it's not like, if you give them what they want, then they'll settle down. It'll just be more atrocities, right? So it's like, why would you want to support that? The argument against like innocents being killed, that's a very strong argument. But when you start, waving the flag, then now you're supporting the actions. And that doesn't make sense. And with the Ukraine thing, it's just remarkable how America is now on the side of Russia and North Korea. And I don't know what the UN vote that just happened earlier today, where the United States now is on the other side of this.
Right. There was a UN resolution condemning, we're 3 years in here, so the UN has to make some sort of resolution, I suppose, condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the United States. Did they abstain or did they vote against?
They voted against it.
Voted against, yeah. But it wasn't like one of those where they could, veto it. I think the vote still went through.
Who even did it? Because Stefaniak's not even been approved yet, because they need her vote in the House still to get stuff through.
Yeah, there was. I saw like the evening news, and it was somebody I never recognized. So some fill-in that they have.
And to tie it back into what I sort of started with here, which is Trump's belief that everything is about the individual at the top and it has nothing to do with anything underneath, it's purely autocratic, and it's so weird to me that is being cheered by seemingly fully half the country. Right. This idea that all that matters is the two men in the room making decisions about the fate of the world, and like it's just not. It's. And I said a couple of weeks, we've been saying since this second administration started that it feels like a pulling away from a global world order that we've known since the end of World War II, and towards something that is much more frightening and unknowable. And people have talked about how it seems like Russia and Trump and China are sort of doing like a new Yalta, where we're going even further back now. We're going to divide up the world into spheres of influence, in which the United States has total domain over what the fuck we've got going over here in the North American continent, in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. We're gonna grab Greenland, we're gonna grab Canada, we're gonna grab the Panama Canal, and we're just gonna fucking make stuff and be happy here in America and not worry about what happens anywhere else in the world. Russia is going to take Ukraine. The belief that Ukraine doesn't exist in a legal or real way will just become acceptable, apparently, in the world. And then who knows where he goes from there. But who cares? Because that's Europe's problem, right? There's a big, beautiful ocean between us and them. And then presumably China, do what you will in the Sea of Japan, and do what you will in the South China Sea as regards Taiwan, right? It's none of our concern. We have nothing to say to you about your adventurism over there, because we don't want you to say anything about our adventurism over here, and that this is the new world that we're going to be living in.
Right. And I've mentioned before, again, the appeal that a dictator who shares your outlook is concerningly high, right? Like,
but what specifically is the outlook, right? To get back to that, there is no outlook.
No, there isn't. But
there's just whatever
China?
Whatever series of dumps he's taken across the Oval Office in the last couple of days.
Right.
That's the outlook that we now have to vociferously and unapologetically defend.
Right. But the thinking is like, well, this is America first, and so we're not helping anybody else. Fuck everybody else. We're going to do our own thing.
Do they know how many people live in China?
I don't think so.
Did they not watch that Olympics?
I don't think
China's going to win.
Yeah, this is
they want to be like that. It seems so obvious.
Right.
China's going to win.
It's very
This is a game
surface
of
level.
risk that China is going to win.
Right.
They started with way more pieces.
In other more domestic news this week, the DOGE or some combination of DOGE and Elon or who knows who sent out that email that I joked about at the top of the show about tell us the 5 things you did last week or risk being terminated. Although we will take your failure to respond as a resignation was a tweet that he did later, not actually included in the official message, presumably because he couldn't get away with saying you'll be fired if you don't respond to this email from some sort of like some lawyer somewhere got a hold of him and was like, we can't. You got to excise that last line from there because that's no good. Don't particularly care to respond to that. I mean, obviously, it's a very bullying and rude thing to do, and it's very demoralizing. Even if you're like a guy who like did a good week's worth of work, it's like, justify that fucking shit that you did last week that your boss made you do.
Right.
It's like
I want to kill myself thinking about telling people what I did last week. Ugh. And I just did my normal job.
It's an incredibly
it's itemizable.
It's an incredibly shitty thing to do, to demand an accounting of everything that a person or the things that mattered that a person did last week in terms of their job in an obvious sort of way, and it's just sort of cruel and unnecessary. There's a subplot going on here with regards to this entire DOGE thing, which is that it's not clear that Elon is officially, like, he's not really signing his name to anything. He doesn't have an official position really within the administration. And so as these things go to court, it's like part of the thing that they're having trouble with, it seems to me, is defining what precisely DOGE is and by whose authority this thing is going on. It's like you were talking about in the pre-show that we're not supposed to mention here. Yeah. It's like somebody sent out an email and you can't quite figure out who sent out the email, right? It's like who do we track this back to know under whose authority this whole thing is going on? And it's like they don't exactly want to assign it to Elon. They don't want to assign it to anybody else because now you have a target to whom to respond, right? In terms of hanging a lawsuit on or against. And so instead they've sort of done this weird thing where they're sort of hiding the ball onto what the underlying authority is to all of this stuff that DOGE is doing in a way that I don't know how long that can last exactly.
Right.
But yeah, it was another week of suffice it to say, it was another week of chaos as relates to Elon and the DOGE stuff.
Right. And ultimately, your actions you'll be held accountable for, right? So you're being asked to provide information that could be divulging information you're not supposed to, right? Because it's like the part of your work includes things that are sensitive or non-public. I'm not talking about national security necessarily, but just there are guidelines and procedures that we must follow under normal circumstances. And the fact that you receive an email saying, give us this information does not change that. So like you could be held responsible for information you share, trying to comply with something that an email told you. Down the road, they'll say, well, you divulge this information, now you're held accountable. Right. And you have no the internet made me do it, or like there's nothing connecting your actions to that outside world, right? So basically, a lot of confusion stems from that. Like, well, wait a minute, I can't just be following a tweet. Like somebody in the chain of command has to say, do A, B, and C, and then I'll do it, and then I can point to that command or that directive.
Is it more likely that Elon Musk gets bored and like runs out of steam and just like fucks off, or that there is this big dramatic falling out with Trump in some way?
I think
or that he dies.
Yeah,
he could die.
I don't see that being likely at this point, but I do wonder if there is going to be a falling out at some point, because like eventually, if you press too many buttons or you ruffle too many feathers, it may not be worth the effort, to have them around, and maybe it becomes implausible in court for the lawyers to argue that there's no connection between the email that are being sent out or the Twitter posts that are being made and the directives that are coming from OPM. And so maybe there is at some point, there's going to be some sort of moment where you can't no longer do this, like for Elon. But we don't know when that's going to be.
It's probably worth noting that, like, though a lot of this stuff plays big online to a particularly online crowd, at least on that side of the political aisle, the things that they're doing aren't going to be popular once it starts impacting anyone that you know, for example.
No, that's
like,
what I'm saying. Like, this isn't going to work out for them in 2 years. But like, what can they destroy in 2 years that can't be fixed is a better question.
I had a follow-on thought to what I said last week about Mike Johnson and how are they going to massage the government shutdown away? Like, how are they going to justify keeping the government going? Given the thrust of the administration thus far. And I realized that I was overlooking the possibility that they would just vote to keep the government open very, very quietly, and no one would even notice, right? Because they're to this point, that's sort of the plan for Congress, is to just shut the fuck up and not really do anything, and just let Trump be the main driver of everything in terms of news coverage, in terms of the national agenda, in terms of all of the rest of it. And so is it possible that does Johnson have enough of a stranglehold on the more obnoxious and mouthy parts of his coalition there in the House to get them to just shut the fuck up and vote to keep the government funded and let Trump do the Trump thing, and we'll do our budget stuff, and like we'll figure it out in September? Or not. Who knows?
I think that's the sticking point. If there isn't an appetite, and I think I said that at some point there's going to be a shutdown, but it just seemed unlikely that it would happen during what's supposed to be the honeymoon period, like 2 months into an administration. But this is a weird second term. But the sticking point will be like, are there enough votes to just pass like the equivalent of a continuing resolution through the end of the fiscal year, through the end of September, and then fight the fight regarding budget reconciliation to have the tax cuts be made permanent down the road? Or is there interest in having that fight now? And if they need to go to a shutdown to kind of apply their leverage, to do so now? Like, to me, like, it seems more likely that they're going to kick the can down the road again. But who knows?
Yeah. All right. I wanted to do a quick little Our Bogus Future segment here, which can double as an Experts Say segment as well. Headline: NPR, taking a break from your smartphone can reboot your mood.
If you ordered coffee on a mobile app while scrolling your feeds this morning, this next story is for you. Researchers decided to find out what would happen to people's moods and attention spans if they turned off their smartphones. NPR's Allison Aubrey tells us how long it took to make a difference.
At a time when more than 90% of Americans have a smartphone, we tend to forget that having a supercomputer at our fingertips all the time is a new phenomenon. Adrian Ward is a psychologist at the University of Texas at Austin. He's in his late 30s, and he remembers having a dial-up connection.
When I was a boy, the internet, we didn't have it at first, but then it lived in a room in our house, and you used it at specific times because you had limited minutes and had to make sure nobody else was on the phone line.
So what would it feel like to go back to those days when we didn't have constant connection to everything? He and his collaborators decided to find out. They recruited 467 participants who agreed to block the internet from their smartphones for 2 weeks. That means no social media scrolling, no streaming, no online shopping on their phones. And it turns out most people, 91% of the participants, seemed to feel better.
What we found was that people had better mental health, better subjective well-being, and better sustained attention.
For example, when participants were asked to perform a task to measure how long they could pay attention, they did better. And when it came to questions such as, how often in the past week have you felt little interest or pleasure in doing things, their responses pointed to a significant lift in mood. Ward says the study results suggest a reduction in symptoms of depression on par with what other studies have found with antidepressant medications.
Not saying it's the same as an antidepressant. Who knows how long-lasting this effect is? But that suggests that it's something worth looking into.
His hypothesis on what actually improves moods isn't about what was taken away from people. After all, they could still use computers at work or home, and they could talk on their phones. It has more to do with what they added back into their lives.
So it's not that you stop using the internet and magically you just feel better. It's that you do other things. And so people reported that they spent more time in nature, more time socializing, more time doing hobbies. They got more sleep.
They felt more socially connected. Dr. Judith Joseph is a psychiatrist and leads a Women in Medicine initiative at Columbia University. She says she's not surprised by the findings. Many people don't want to be tethered to their devices.
They know their phones are a problem. They just can't stop. So helping people to retrain their brain to derive joy from healthy places has an antidepressant effect. And that's why I'm not surprised.
A lot of the participants in the study found that they had to break the rules. For example, when they were in their cars and needed to use a map app for directions or log on to a Zoom meeting for work. It's a reminder of how dependent we've become. So even if you can't turn off the internet, Dr. Joseph recommends taking little breaks, beginning with baby steps.
Slowly over time, if you can do this, even for 30 minutes here, 20 minutes there, build up. Try to see if you can increase these increments on a weekly basis.
Or here's one idea to get started. If you go out for a walk after dinner, leave your smartphone behind and see how you feel. Allison Aubrey, NPR News.
So yeah, I wanted to play that in part because Lori is constantly dismissive of my complaints about how my relationship with the phone, and she's like, just stop, just stop.
I'm not dismissive of your complaints. I'm dismissive of your insistence that you can't just put it down.
I think that is it's a fine thing to say at the sort of at the macro, at the personal level, right? To an individual, you can have that sort of a conversation.
Sure, that's how I think of things.
Yet, it seems to be the case that like huge numbers of our fellow human beings are using these devices in a way that is counter to what they want or their expressed preference and their own emotional and psychological well-being. And if that's the case, is it rational to just say to someone, well, stop, stupid? Right? Like, and it's certainly not a useful response. And yeah, maybe it's just people, I'm such a victim. I can't use my will to actually be in the world in a way that I want to be. Or maybe in the same way that when, for example, people talk about roads, right? And the traffic on the roads, and it's like, We've designed the infrastructure of modern life in such a way that it is actually counter to human thriving and well-being, right? Because we wanted these big, the Strodes conversation, right? We want these big 6-lane things. It is 45 miles an hour, but you have to turn left across traffic, and it's this fucking nightmare where you might get sideswiped at some asshole doing 60 in a 45, and like it's not the individual that matters in that context because we've built the infrastructure in such a way to deliver a result. And we're getting the result that the infrastructure was built to deliver. In the same way with these fucking devices, the supercomputers in our pockets, which, again, long-standing position, the longest-standing position of the good website brainiron.com is that we suspect that we should
not available on mobile.
We should take the phone out of our pocket and smash it into the nearest brick wall, and that might actually be better for us. And you don't often hear someone denying that, right? Like it takes a real true believer to insist that actually the smartphone is an overwhelmingly positive presence in the individual's life.
Right. You will have a much better time if you were just to not have a phone in your home. Similar to if you just don't have junk food in your home, you're not going to even have to think about eating the junk food. Like if you just had like just, fruit and vegetables and like good food in your home, then that's your new reality. You're going to live in that world. But if there's just a bunch of donuts, you may say like, I'm not going to eat the donuts. But eventually you're going to eat the donuts. They're right there, right? And so like eventually you're going to pick up the phone and use it. And so I don't know about, the problem is that there's a need, there's actually like a functional need to have a smartphone for many people, like parents with their kids at school. And
Like the maps, he said.
there are so many other uses for it. It's kind of like now, it's like an inoperable brain tumor. You have to kind of live with a tumor.
It's just like the roads, right? It's just like these awful roads that we built in order to maximize the number of people who can get from point A to point B, and we build the stores along the side of the road, then pop up. Like the infrastructure has been developed in such a way as to lead to sort of anti-human results.
Yeah.
Like in terms of the actual emotional and psychological well-being of all of us.
Right.
Yes, it does seem utterly unovercomable. And I know that it is simple for Lori to say, simply stop it, simply don't look at it. But like in a serious way, I can believe that it is counter to my emotional and psychological well-being to look at the phone, and I'm still going to look at the fucking phone.
Right.
It's just what it, and it's not. Is it my fault? Yeah, sure. In some important way, it is my fault. But in others, if it's a replicable feeling among vast swaths of the population, then I don't think it is rational to blame the individual necessarily.
Right. Speaking of
blame.
Yeah, the Strodes and the weird setup we have with cities where you have to like commute long distances to get to home or to work or whatever. There was this weird pushback against 15-minute cities. Remember, there was it was a very brief moment where it was almost like presented as if it was a conspiracy that city planners would want to devise an area to where you can get to whatever you want within a short period of time. You would think like that would be something that would be welcome, but it was...
Wasn't the idiotic reaction to that wasn't it a racist or social justice-y? Wasn't the complaint
was that
somehow...
what it was? Okay, I must have missed that. But I just remember there was some sort of blowback to... I was like, wait, why would you want more... Because everybody hates traffic, right? Everybody hates these long commutes. And so if you can get to everything you want within 15 minutes, you would think that would be welcome by everybody. But there was this strange reaction.
All right. The Google AI tells me that the arguments against the 15-minute city concept include concerns about potential limitations on mobility, increased traffic congestion within local areas, potential for socioeconomic inequalities, blah, blah, blah.
Aren't those all of those factors present in our current system?
Right. The world already sucks, but it might continue to suck. Concerns exist that the 15-minute city could exacerbate existing inequalities if not carefully implemented, potentially pricing out lower-income residents from desirable areas with readily accessible amenities.
Which is also already the way it is. We had snow here last week again, and it was sort of, the roads were bad, but it was sort of like if you live in town, you can make it to work.
Yeah.
Like you can, it's not a good road, but like you can make it. Of the 30 stylists that work in this little town, that's at the salon in a town, I think only 6 of us live within a safe driving distance in a storm.
Wow.
Because you can't afford it.
Yeah.
And some people don't want to. It's not all because you can't afford it.
That's true.
But like a lot of people would, but they live 40 minutes away in a different small town that isn't as nice.
Crazy.
Anyway, whatever. I guess there's nothing to say about this NPR story about how the smartphone is bad for your brain and that we all feel better when we don't use it as much, except like, I mean, if that's true, like if it is the case that nearly 100% of people felt better after taking a break from their smartphones, and 90% of Americans have smartphones, then like what are we doing?
Right.
Like, is the headline for this NPR story? Should it just be our bogus future?
Right.
Because like we just simply we have built a world that seems to immiserate us on purpose. And like I know again I can hear Lori in the back of my head saying, just fucking put it down, don't look at it.
I'm not saying that.
No, I know. But also like it's not only immiserating us on the emotional psychological level, it is also seems to be perhaps deranging literally everything else. Right. So like it's real bad, but fuck it. Like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Like, stop building Strodes?
You know, if imagine, 5 years from now or however long years from now, there's like comprehensive studies. They look back for many years. There's a lot of data now with this internet world we're living in. If they came to the conclusion that there is such a thing as internet derangement syndrome, right? Just like the use of these mobile devices inevitably will lead to some sort of derangement in the way you see the world, the way you process information. I imagine many people would reject it. They'd be so addicted to it would be part of their life. They'll say, nah, it's fucking bullshit. I don't believe that. It's not gonna be like with smoking, like, even if you're smoking, like, yeah, smoking's not good for you, but like, fuck it, I'll still do it. I think some people would say
I'm sure
no.
I'm sure you're absolutely right that a large percentage of the population would flat out reject it, and the rest of us who believe it would continue using the thing, right?
Yes.
And that's super fucking weird. And I can't think of an example.
I mean, cigarettes, like Abe said, fatty food. Gross. I mean, we know.
It is close to the junk food conversation, I suppose, but like it doesn't require a Herculean effort for me to cook a healthy dinner for my family, right?
Yes, but
like
you don't work.
It requires slightly more work.
Right, but the chart
are
also...
No, I'm not
Holiday.
talking. Okay, the putting aside, you could pick up a healthy dinner for your family if you work fucking 40 or 50 hours a week, right? Does it cost more money? Do you benefit by being in a certain socioeconomic class in order to be able to do this? Yes, but like a poor person, to some extent, it would require more of a Herculean effort in order to eat healthy, but like. People do it.
Yes.
People get it done, right? There are people who go out of their way to exist in this awful food culture in a way that is actually perfectly, relatively fine. Like, we do a pretty decent job. Not a great job. Probably too much half-prepared foods and not enough truly homemade whole foods that I feed my family. But we're busy.
And some of us like the processed food.
I mean, they're
It tastes
engineered
good.
to be liked, though, yeah. I mean...
Right.
Yeah, they designed it in a lab for me to like it.
Right. The point being that it's not this massive Herculean effort to feed my kids a relatively healthy diet, right? To make
And
them
your wife.
to make them lunch every day, and that includes fresh fruits and vegetables, and to make them a good breakfast every morning. It's just a little bit more effort, and so I do it. To do the thing with the smartphone that I think would be better for me would seemingly require a much greater lift. And like, what percentage of people are going to do that? And it's obviously it's not that many.
It's interesting you mentioned that because on paper, one thing you need to eat. You don't need to use your phone. You can. I mean, I guess there are some needs, but like you can use your computer or whatever, like a stationary computer, to get around it. But the difficulty seems to be more. There's some sort of like impulsive nature to the phone because you're picking it up far more often than you're eating.
And it's different than other media consumption, right?
Yeah.
Because like it just is. Like people maybe made the same complaints about television and cable television and who knows what else, but like it's just obviously different.
Oh, it's like on steroids. Yeah, whatever faults there were with televisions and whatnot, it's nothing like. Because it goes with you everywhere, everywhere you go. Even on the NPR we're talking about going out for a walk. I go for a walk daily, and people are on their phones.
Yeah. All right, time to play an old favorite. It's time for America's favorite game show.
It's now time for America's favorite game show. Did Mark Strassmann, CBS News' senior national correspondent, get off a good one?
Did CBS News' senior national news correspondent, Mark Strassmann, get off a good one? This is actually from a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, our boy's back. There's been a lot of shakeups in the news world, right? The Lester Holt is leaving.
Lester Holt is stepping down.
Joe Reed got shit canned, but our boy is still there with his stories. It's CBS.
Let's not put Joy Reid on the same plane as Lester Holt.
Stories.
Or even Mark Strassmann, for that matter. All right, this is something near and dear to Lori's heart. This headline, county workers wanted a raise, but got a 4-day work week instead.
It is, but also, one thing on these federal employees, how much vacation do you have?
Yeah, a lot.
Fucking lot. Maybe stop giving fucking vacation to people for doing nothing. Save money that way. Elon
Fucking
Musk.
Lori, just a MAGA DOGE diehard, as it turns out.
I'm so tired all the time.
They're supposed to, like, they take these jobs, they get the vacation days because they're not great jobs. They don't fulfill in the way that it's a passion project of a job might, and so you need to give them time off to fulfill their other human needs, right? Abe, you need to flourish.
That's right. I need to go to the Grand Canyon occasionally.
I guess who's going to go to Indianapolis if Abe doesn't?
That's right.
All right, Mark Strassmann on county workers who wanted a raise but got a 4-day work week instead.
To a corner of America where it is already Friday, the final day of a work week that lasts only 4 days. Some would call that heaven. They call it Friday Harbor, Washington. Mark Strassmann worked his way there for tonight's Eye on America.
In the San Juan Islands, off the coast of Washington State, county workers like Brock Polda never got the pay raise they demanded. They've celebrated ever since.
As soon as you heard somebody say, how about a 4-day work week, what'd you think?
Light bulb. Absolutely.
Polda drives a county truck. Nadine Varsovia, his girlfriend, works in human resources.
To get paid the same amount of money and work 1 day less sounds like everyone's dream.
It really is.
It really is. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, money really only does so much for you. And what's the good of having that money anyway if I can't use it to do anything for fun?
Especially in this magnificent isolation, roughly a 90-minute ferry ride from the mainland. San Juan County had a problem. It agreed that workers were due a raise, but the county had no money. Instead, it offered time, a 3-day weekend every weekend.
Everyone I see on Friday when I'm in the grocery store running errands, they're just, must be nice. Oh, wow, county guy in here. And I just smile and laugh.
40 hours pay for 32 hours work involves a trade-off. Many county offices are closed on Fridays.
Was there griping at the beginning?
There was certainly some concern from residents at the beginning.
Brandon Andrews, the county's Parks and Fair director here, helped negotiate the deal.
Do you want us to raise taxes when things are already expensive? Do you want to cut services, or do you want us to get creative?
In the year plus since this reduced work week began, avoiding a big pay raise for employees saved San Juan County nearly $1 million. Job applications are up 85%, while the turnover rate is down 43%. And employees calling in sick also down by 23%.
I'm going to pick you up after school. Yeah? Okay.
For Katie Fleming, it's meant more time for her family and volunteering.
Wow, you guys. Good thing for monthly beach cleanups.
She's the county's solid waste coordinator. We caught up with her cleaning storm debris along the beach.
Work-life balance. That is, I think, the biggest thing.
If people are watching and saying, well, of course, what a great deal for you, you're saying you're working just as hard.
Just as productive, yeah. I know in my department, we're getting the same amount of work done.
Nadine Varsovia agrees.
So there's a lot less chit-chat in the office, a lot more people just kind of nose to the grindstone getting their work done.
And recruiting for open jobs on this isolated island suddenly has become a breeze.
So has your job become a whole lot easier?
Yes, filling positions is great. Now we get our pick of the litter, if you will. What used to be, well, we'll take a warm body, is now we get our choices.
She used the extra time to finish her master's degree.
If you had to work 40 hours a week but get a pay raise, would you rather have that?
In all honesty, no.
No.
No,
yeah, absolutely not. No.
Yeah, you know, money is really only worth so much. I'd rather have that time for myself.
On this Pacific Northwest gem, today is TGIT. Thank God it's Thursday. For Eye on America, Mark Strassmann in Friday Harbor, Washington.
All right, Abe. Did CBS News' senior national news correspondent, Mark Strassmann, get off a good one?
I think the only one that I noticed was some that mention about recruitment on the island has become a breeze. That's the only one that I can maybe give credit to. I will say, so I'm going to say
no TGIT. You
yeah,
don't like the
no low effort even by my boy Strassmann.
Ooh, sorry, Mark. Try again next time.
So I'm going to say officially no. The money does not matter argument, which was made both times at the top and at the end of that segment, I found curious because like they wanted a pay raise. And they were told, no money for that, but you can just take Fridays off. And like no zealot, like a convert. All of a sudden, money matters not
Their
at all.
hourly rate
Like,
went up.
I'm just fuck money. What do you need money for?
Their hourly rate went up.
Right, but it's just weird that like you were wanting more money, right? And they told you
Because when your job sucks,
right? I know, but like at least
you
you
want to
recognize
be
the fact that
compensated
money was
more.
important, and it is important, and the trade-off is worth it because of blah blah blah. But don't pretend that money
because
does
it's
not
the
matter.
principle of the thing.
What's funny is like in all likelihood, this was not like I need a raise for performance. This was just like, look, it's been 3 years.
I can go do other shit.
No, it's been 3 years and fucking inflation sucks ass.
Right.
And like, you need to pay me more because my money doesn't go as far as it used to. And like, they're willing to say, well, I don't care because I don't have to work on
Also,
Friday.
with an extra day, you can do meal prep and save money on food.
Right.
Like time,
Also,
I
time
don't
is
think-
so valuable.
I don't think those folks are doing healthy meal
Whatever.
prep
I'm just
based on that.
saying. Like,
I bet.
I sort of did this just now. Like, I am working now only 3 days behind the chair,
Nice.
but those 2 other days I'm still working, but I'm not doing the job that I don't want to do. I'm doing a different one.
Yeah.
And I'm getting paid less per paycheck, but I'm slightly less miserable.
There you go.
Oh, and these people are overwhelmingly less miserable because
Yeah,
they're not.
They're actually not, but I'm doing the same amount of work. It's
They're-
just different.
What's funny is they're almost certainly all doing the same amount of work. Also,
Yes.
right?
Apparently, there's
Like,
8
it's-
hours
just
of
more
chit chat
efficient.
that they're able to trim.
Right. How
Yep.
much? So that's sort of the question that I come away from this story with, which is like, how much buffer has been built into this 40-hour work week, right? Like, if you could take out all of the, like, legitimately, because you read things online about people who have these Zoom jobs or the computer jobs, right, where they work from home, and I don't know, you'd see like Reddit posts about it. It's like, yeah, I worked for like an hour and a half this morning and then mostly just dicked around and did what I wanted to do,
Right.
and then made sure I was available to respond to emails or calls from my colleagues. But like literally all of my work I did from 9 a.m. to 10:30, and then pretty much nothing
Right.
else the rest of the day.
Right.
Like, how much fluff and buffer is built into the average job? And I imagine it's much less for the guy who drives the fucking forklift,
Yeah.
or the bulldozer or whatever, and much more for the HR girlfriend,
Right. Yeah.
who works in the office. But I recall this is
Which one can a robot do more
practically
easily?
a previous life for you. But when you were more less of the sort of evolved professional that you are now, you would talk about mostly as it relates to your colleagues, but like the amount of work that was actually getting done is just minuscule, right? And like you would be sort of frowned upon if you did too much. Right now, this is obviously a previous IRS administration, and it's certainly not a reflection of the current federal workforce
Yes.
in any negative sort of way. But like, do you think that maintains, like, to some extent? Like, and obviously it's a loaded conversation to have at the moment because of the way that Trump and DOGE and Elon are going about this process now, right? Which is what we sort of discussed last week, which is there is plenty of waste and fraud, potentially, probably far more just waste,
Right.
and like I was saying, buffer built into the average workday of the average federal employee. And there was a thing posted on Drudge today. A link to a story in City Journal talking about like the workplace chat of NSA and CIA employees, and how like just fucking off the rails things would get for hours at a time, where people are just chatting about their fucking sex lives and their pronouns during the workday for like 4 or 5 hours a day.
yeah.
It's like, what are we doing in the company Slack?
Right.
And like, yeah, sure, there's shit to do, but like we got our job done, so who fucking cares, I guess. But like, so yeah, there's obviously legitimate things to be sort of siphoned off of the bloat that is the federal government.
Right.
They're just going about it the wrong way.
I don't know. This may not have been legal, but wasn't there a period, either at Papa John's or Domino's, I forget, where there was this this policy to where, like, we're going to have you off the clock, but you have to kind of be available, just be...
100%.
Oh, this was the worst. That was the worst aspect of my job as a manager.
Which, again, I don't know how legal it ever was to just be like...
it was profoundly unacceptable from a moral, ethical standpoint, and I would imagine against all fair labor practices and presumably against the law in some important way.
That's why Mike D went to law school, and then he ended up working for the man.
Oh, right.
Like they do.
He wanted to keep upset prisoners locked in jail. He went to law school because he was upset about the unfair labor practices of the company that he worked for to work his way through college.
That was the origin story?
Ended up in a job in which he...
Withholding medicine.
He just wrote... like counterclaims to prisoners who felt they were being mistreated in prison, and then he would just reject all of those claims.
Oh, there you go.
That's the moral
America.
arc of the long moral arc of the universe eventually bends toward justice. Kinda. But yeah, I would have to clock people out. My job when it came to managing the labor especially at PJ's. Early in the managerial career.
Yeah, when I worked there.
Was to have on the schedule, for example, on a Tuesday night, you might have, I'll just make these numbers up off the top of my head, there might be 50 labor hours scheduled or something like that. Imagine that's the case. You have 50 labor hours scheduled for dinner rush. Your job would be, though there are 50 labor hours scheduled, can you get it down to 45 or 42 with rotating breaks? And by breaks, we mean literally taking someone off the clock and saying, go stand outside or in the back for 7 minutes, and then clock back in, right? You can smoke a cigarette if you want. You get a drink of water. You can go to the bathroom. You can do whatever you want to do. You're on break. You're not permitted to leave.
Right.
You will come back either in a set amount of time or when I fucking need you. Right?
So you're basically like on call, but off the payroll.
Off payroll, on call, but on the premises.
Yeah.
Right? Not just on call, like, hey, come on back now, but like, no, literally in the moment that the phone is ringing, clock back in and do work again. Like the most nightmarish, dystopic way of imagining that you're supposed to be treating a fellow human being was what I was called upon to do on a nightly basis. Right. And then judged with how efficiently I managed the financial situation of my fucking friends for the most part, right? Like, how much money could I take out of the pockets of my actual friends tonight was how successful I was deemed to be at doing my job.
See, so the key is you have to have a gap in empathy, like with the Mike example. As long as it's not people that you are seeing and interacting with, if you're at some remove, it's much easier to do it. But I raise that point to say that there are lulls in action, so to speak, where I work, but there isn't a mechanism.
So to speak, as he consumes the entirety of the CBS News output, the 47 hours of news content that
That's
CBS
multitasking
puts out.
he's doing.
That he consumes in 6 hours. So yes, is the answer. We could probably
but there
find
isn't
some
as far as we know, a legal way to account for those gaps because they're not predictable. Sometimes it gets busy, and then sometimes it slows down. So you have to live with this 40-hour window.
It probably also like this like Friday Harbor in Washington. Did they name that after the fact? How the fuck did they manage to have this thing be implemented in Friday Harbor? And also, this is a crime against humanity that Strassmann didn't get off a good one, specifically related to Friday Harbor giving the county employees the day off on Friday. I was going to be so mad at you if you gave him credit for a good one with the nonsense that he attempted there. Because it was right there. Mark, what the fuck were you doing?
He lost his fastball.
I'm telling you, I think that we willed into being the end of Strassmann getting off a good one with my insistence on trying to find them. Like, I think he fucking got wind of this.
Yeah.
It's possible, but it also getting late.
He's not even attempting, right? I mean, there are, I'm sure, a couple of opportunities there. I don't know if he's got like a new producer, editor who's like clipping them off, or I don't know what's going on, but.
All right, we still have to record the other show, so we're gonna get out of here. You've been listening to Cast Iron Brains, a podcast with Bob and Abe. Find the show on Substack, brainiron.substack.com, where you can literally, legitimately find more from us, including the Billboard Hot 100 game, which now lives only on the Substack. So go subscribe to the emails, brainiron.substack.com, and you can listen to us talk about pop music of today and yesterday. Also, the opening and closing themes of the show were composed by Mark Gillig. And as long as you're clicking around the internet, go to tetramermusic.com, Tetramer music.com for more. From Mark, Abe, did you make it to the movies this week? There's a new release, a Stephen King adaptation of a story that I read out of the collection Skeleton Crew called The Monkey, which looks ridiculous. Is that the movie you went to go see this week?
No. Actually, I'm just not realizing I went to go see a movie that's not even in like the top 10 box office releases of the weekend. So I went to go see Cleaner, which is a UK movie. Stars the Star Wars kid, Daisy Ridley. What's her face?
Ray?
Yeah. And for like a very brief moment, Clive Owen. But again, I don't see this. This must have been a very limited release, like maybe just that one showing on this weekend that I went to. The movie is not that good, but it's a lot of people are comparing it to like Die Hard because it's like a skyscraper, like a high-rise building. There's like some nefarious activity going inside the building, and there's one person who's like doing all they can to stop the terrorists from doing whatever. And playing the role of Bruce Willis is Daisy Ridley. She is
believable.
She is a window cleaner, right? She grew up like she loved to climb. You know, they show like a scene from her past when she was like a little kid, and her parents are fighting, and she's like climbing the cabinets and just randomly just climbing onto things, right? And I guess that was supposed to be like this is her as a 8-year-old, and then they cut to the future.
She parlayed that passion into window cleaning.
But not only is she a window
soothe her soul.
Yeah, not only is she a window cleaner at this high rise in London, she also has, because it'll come in handy in a moment, a prior military experience, right? So she was in the military, and then somehow she was like, what else am I going to do? Let me go clean these windows. And so she's witness to Clive Owen and company storming this. There was some sort of event for like this shitty, evil mega corporation, and they go out of their way to make sure that the brothers who are the heads of this company, who are like, I guess, polluting the planet, are just like terrible people, one more than the other, just like gross, rich people.
By the way, not to get sidetracked here, there's a theory of pop culture criticism says that you can look at who American movie enemies are and learn something about the world, right? Yeah. It's sort of an important thing you can track. We have the fucking Nazis, and then we have the fucking Russians, and like whoever the
Muslims.
Muslims. You have nondescript Eastern Europeans pop up there for a while. Whatever. We were watching that awful Jason Bateman movie at the airport. Carry On a couple weeks ago, and the kicker at the end of the movie is that, or maybe you figure out like 3/4 of the way through, is that the bad guy there, they're hiding the ball on who the bad guy is this entire time. It's just Jason Bateman represents some organization that wants to seemingly explode a plane, and you don't know why. And then you find out, well, there's a politician on that plane, and they want to kill this congressperson, and the reason behind wanting to kill the congressperson is because there's an evil corporation that is going to benefit greatly from this person dying. That the evil defense industry.
She's like a bill. She's going to sign a bill.
She's got a bill that doesn't have popular support. But if they if they kill her, then all of a sudden her bill will gain popular support because in sympathy for her cause or whatever. And then the evil like Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or Halliburton was the one that it struck me. It was like, oh, Halliburton is the bad guy in this fucking movie, and it sounds like Halliburton is the bad guy in this fucking movie too. It's fucking lame, and this speaks directly to the moral failings and the lack of a clear moral imagination that exists within America anymore. We can't have fucking Hamas be the bad guy. We can't have the Russians be the fucking bad guy. We can't have China be the bad guy because we want to show our fucking movies there. We're fucking cowards, and we make nameless, faceless Raytheon the fucking bad guy.
To be clear, this is a UK production, but there is a wrinkle to be that's going to throw this off a little bit. So the terrorist group that's there, they're eco-terrorists. Like, oh, the environment, you have ruined it. How dare you, blah, blah, blah. So their goal is to, under duress, force these rich people to confess their misdeeds. And then in so doing, it's, actual misdeeds, not like make them say something that's not true, but actually confess the things their companies have done. It's not just the evil mega corp. It's a bunch of friends who own other companies who are doing the same, right? So, we're going to make you confess to the world your stock and your reputation will plummet and your value will go to zero. So we're not going to steal any money from you. We're going to make you less valuable by what we're doing. The wrinkle is there is a faction within this eco-terrorist group that they're like the Hamas. Like, they want to go further. This is not enough. So, like, there's a younger guy who's not listening to Clive Owen's, like, let's be reasonable. We're just trying to get to send a message out. He just wants to kill everybody. So he is I didn't know this, but he's an anti-humanist, the young guy. He's like, there is no redeemable qualities about us human, so we need to kill each other off. So he just kills poor Clive Owen, who was not sympathetic up until he got shot.
Spoilers. Never come into one of these end-of-show reviews with the expectation that Abe is going to be careful about spoiling the movie.
Well, he's only going to...
The fact that he remembers any of the movie is he's so excited that he's let me get the whole thing
isn't going to tell us the spoilers of movies he wants us to see.
Yeah, this is not
That's
a good
true.
movie
Good point.
because I don't know who the casting director was for this, but they whiffed on the younger... I don't care about the role. He just was too cartoonish, like in his zeal. Like, I don't care. I'm going to kill everybody, blah, blah, blah. And he was a window cleaner also earlier in the movie. He was like semi-friendly, chummy with Daisy. And then it turned out he was like an evil guy. And then she sorts him out later and everything's all well. But like, at the end, you become like a little sympathetic to the human. And now it's a human versus anti-human dynamic, right? It's no longer evil company. It's like, hey, they're not just trying to kill that guy. Is not just trying to kill the evil billionaire. It's not that it's okay to kill people, but he's there to kill the whole building. All the cops are going to come in to try to rescue, just destroy everything. He just a destructive.
He is anti-civilization.
Yeah, because he thinks that there's nothing that, like, if you kill these bums, there'll be new evildoers, to fuck up the planet anyway. So what's the point? So he just wants to kill everybody. I think he just wants to kill himself, and he's just taking everybody else with him. So
how did you land on this movie to go see?
But mostly because of how badly they botched that character. It's not worth it. It could work otherwise, but it doesn't. Also, Bruce Willis, I guess I've taken him for granted. Very charming, charismatic guy. Daisy,
in this movie?
Less so. Like if you watch Die Hard, the way he kind of like interacts, like he's just a likable guy you want to see.
Is he in this movie?
No, he's saying that Daisy Ridley is the
Bruce
Willis.
She's kind of playing that.
Got it.
It requires a certain amount of charm, and she doesn't.
Right.
Have it.
She's a little, and she's got like this.
By the way, that's extremely anti-feminist of you to say.
Abe is the best feminist. He can say that.
She's got this. I know this is not going to be a good thing to say either. She's got like this brother who's like autistic, and so there are a lot of scene stealing of just like him just like not getting it, like I'm a little distressed because terrorists are here. It's just the movie just gets, I don't know, a lot of choices I would not have made. I don't recommend seeing this unless it comes on streaming. This seems like it's going to be like a one weekend only thing because it did not make any money in the theaters, so you may see it.
Anything else? Did you go to the theaters for or
Nothing
watch on
else
television?
on the theater front, and then I watched the second episode of the White Lotus.
Yeah. And not a bad episode of White Lotus, as those things go.
Arnold's kid is really swinging for the fences there. Like he's
a real son of a bitch. That one.
Also, I've never been like a girl dealing with other girls, but like those three girls are like just taking pot shots at each other constant. Like,
no, those are real people.
Is that a normal dynamic?
Those are clients of mine.
Okay, holy shit! I'm like,
those are clients of mine. Those three women are as real as any characters have gotten in this show.
I was like, man, there's just so much like, and it's like, you know, you open with a lot of niceties. It's kind of like there was Louis C.K.'s joke where he would like say, obviously, something is true, like of course that, and then he would kind of undermine it by saying but, and then he'd say the wrong thing. Like they would often say like she's great, but oh my god, her kids are a fucking nightmare, and It just kind of the format of that was very reminiscent of a Louis C.K. bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the best friends who all sort of harbor secret and long-standing hatreds of one another is a very that's super real.
Yeah.
I am aware of those sorts of dynamics in the world out there. All right, what did we watch?
Okay, on Friday we watched Severance and more Shoresy.
Shoresy's great, by the way.
It's
we watched
good.
Got all the way through season 1. And
what streaming service? I'm sure I asked this before, but what?
Hulu.
It's on Hulu. It's very much going to be like watch the first 2 episodes, and if it's like nope, not for me, then it's not for you.
2 episodes
but
are
give
all
it,
you
give
need
it 2
to-
episodes.
Give it 2 episodes.
And you'll get a kick out of it after that, I suspect.
It's so good.
Yeah, we didn't
You don't
watch,
even know because you haven't seen it. It's so
No,
good.
but like season 1 was good, and then it manages to be touching in a way that you don't expect it to be at the end of season 1.
Look at that.
In the way that I always insist that losing is good, actually. Losing is good, actually, and I'd like to maintain that belief. Even though whatever, you can watch the show, but the best moment of season 1 involves losing, and losing is almost always better than winning, but not always, but almost always.
It's so good. It's so good.
What we didn't watch, I'll start by saying what we didn't watch is The Gorge.
We didn't watch The George,
which is a movie on Apple TV Plus, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller.
We're going to have to pronounce it George if you're going to keep pronouncing it Jiff.
The word is Jiff, and the word is gorge.
It's George.
The Gorge, I have reason to believe, is a terrible movie, and that can be...
It looks fantastic.
It can be ascertained by just watching the trailer.
What's the summary of what is it about?
Miles Teller, and there's the gateway to hell.
All right, you're doing a bad job already. Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy are elite military snipers who have been sent to...
Hot ones.
Yeah,
they have hot
fucking
ones.
Smoking ones, obviously.
They're in cahoots?
By the
They're
way,
like together? They're like Mr. and Mrs.
No, they're across a George.
Specifically, they're not meant to interact at all.
Even though they put their stations right across from each other.
But I have bad news for the people who set the rules about how the snipers shouldn't
They're
interact.
hot.
These are 2 very hot people, and they are going to interact in ways that you cannot possibly imagine.
You can imagine. You can imagine them.
The thing that is utterly unbelievable among the many things. Anyway,
we're gonna watch it.
Elite military
Stop
snipers.
acting like we're not going to watch it. We just didn't.
They are called by their respective governments or super governmental agencies to descend upon this area where they are going to be given a 1-year post to stand guard over the Gorge, where they are told that great evil lies within and
gateway to hell,
will be
obviously.
coming out, and they have to shoot it dead before the evil escapes to the wider world. For some reason that is unknown because of the trailer or through the trailer, they're not meant to interact with the people on the other side of the gorge. And so they start communicating with binoculars, and like they write on posters in large font so that the other person can see it, so they can talk to one another. Anyway, I have reason to believe this is a terrible movie because it looks like a terrible movie. Also, Anya Taylor-Joy is not at all believably cast as an elite military sniper who does martial arts and stuff. Like it's just
no, she's good as she's sitting. It's the moving. She's not really good at the moving.
believable
Not a
as
dancer.
a genius child prodigy chess player, perhaps, but not as an elite military
She doesn't
sniper.
move right.
I do hope you hold the same view of your girl, Anna, what's her face? I was watching a trailer for a movie a couple weeks ago, and one of the trailers was for like Ana de Armas. She was some badass military elite, whatever. I'm like, give me a fucking break. Like, just that was my initial thought. I'll give the movie a chance when it comes out.
Well, it's not.
But,
It's specifically this Anya Taylor-Joy. Like, they have her run.
Oh,
and it's
okay.
like, oh, no. She doesn't do that.
Okay.
So, like, it's not because of her acting that she's not good at it.
I fully believe that Ana de Armas can do literally whatever she wants to do.
She might, but you just don't know until you try.
ballerina.
Like the
To-
way that Tom
to me
Cruise
specifically.
and guy from the Jason Bateman movie, they run and they look good running. Like some people look good doing secret military things, and other people look like they're actors.
Yeah. I don't know if I've mentioned on the show before. I think I have a podcast called the Lex G Movie Podcast. But it's this guy who's about 10 years older than we are, who just gets on his home microphone set up there and talks about movies for like 45 minutes or an hour or sometimes longer. And like to no one, he just goes.
Oh, wow.
Like
Okay.
he turns on the thing and he talks about movies that he's seen or movies that he loved growing up. And he's, like I said, he's about 10 years older than us, so he's much more Gen X than we are. But he reminds me a great deal of other people and people who watched movies in the way that I did growing up. Again, this is one of those like if this is your thing, then you'll get a kick out of it. His sense of humor is probably not for everyone, and it's weird in the same way that like watching a Twitch streamer is like it's weird. Like, why would you listen to this guy talk about his opinions about movies for an hour? He's literally no one. He's just some fucking guy who puts out an hour-long podcast when the mood strikes him. But he does like a 40-minute review of The Gorge and just shits on it relentlessly for 40 fucking minutes. And
Well, we're gonna watch it next weekend.
and
probably.
I recommend that people go out there and find the Lex G Movie Podcast and listen to it. You might hate it, and I apologize. It might not be your thing, but if it is your thing, like if this is the sort of guy that you get a kick out of, then you will thank me later. Nice. So
What we did watch was Godzilla -1.
we watched Godzilla -1 instead of a really terrible movie. We watched a pretty good movie. I will say about a movie that I largely enjoyed. It speaks directly, and this is classic me. Like find the cloud inside the silver lining as best as you can. But the fact that this movie was as well received as it was,
And of course, the cloud has nothing to do with the movie,
and
only something to do with something above and beyond the movie's control.
It speaks directly to the paucity, the poverty of movies in general. Like this was a fine.
It was fine.
Movie,
Did you see
right?
the front runners for the best picture this year? I mean, it's a pretty down year altogether. You got to.
It's not Godzilla -1 is not one of them.
It's not a
No,
great
I'm saying just
movie.
like there haven't been a lot of good movies lately. It's been down.
Right. But Godzilla -1 was talked about as like, oh, this is an awesome movie. You need to go see it. It made all this money. And like, I agree. It was a perfectly fine movie. Like, it was good. Also, like, it was like it's a little weird. It's in its presentation of the characters. It's a little bit like ham-handed and ham-fisted and whatever. It's not my idiom in any
it's
sort of way.
It's a perfect double feature. Oppenheimer, the bomb drops, and then the movie starts. It's like, that's what you should do.
Fair.
Instead of the Barbie movie. Yeah.
Also fair. And also, the thing that was praised was this is a cheaply made movie, and the computer graphics look really good, right? Like it's sort of. And sorry, they actually don't.
They look. What they are is bright. At least they're not that dark
It
Marvel.
looks, I know, but it still kind of looks like shit. Like it's just stupid fucking dinosaur who looks like a penis. And by the way, this maybe speaks to something inside me that is weird that I didn't know about.
No, he's always looked a little like
until
that.
recently. But Godzilla, who is extremely spiky and large and not not exactly penis-shaped.
No.
He screams penis to me. Like, if you look at that character as he comes out of the ocean, there's something about it that is very
Well, it's
penis-y.
like how the bamboo shoots in the backyard scream penis to me.
Yeah.
They look like penises.
I mean, when it gets
wouldn't,
agitated, it shoots things, right? So it's very penis-like.
That's
there.
true. The agitation does also result in weird blue lightning erupting from its mouth hole in a way that is somewhat phallic. But nothing about Godzilla intellectually would, I think, should ring the penis bell.
Something about his rounded nose.
But there's something about this character that says penis to me. And like the opening shot of the movie is of the cowardly kamikaze pilot landing on that island. And it is screamingly obvious that is not happening.
Right.
It's a computer-generated plane landing on a computer-generated runway, and it's not happening anywhere in the real world. And it's just
They should have just landed a plane.
just land the fucking plane and take a shot of it from the ground or from the air. You don't have to do the fancy thing where you're in an impossible spot in order to get the impossible camera angle because it's an impossible thing that's happening. Just shoot the plane landing on the ground and it would be fine.
You got to cut costs somewhere, Bob.
I guess so. All right. Well, Godzilla -1, a pretty good movie on Netflix if you want to check it out. But don't go expecting the world. But a pretty good movie. Anything else for us tonight, Abe?
Nope.
I should rephrase that. Abe, have you got anything else for us tonight?
Nope.
Well, I guess that's all we've got for you tonight then, and we will talk to you next time.
Later.
Sadly, they had Marquayne Mullen on at least one of the shows this weekend, which means that no sense was made. And he was on before Cory Booker came on one of the shows. And listening to Marquayne Mullen speak, it was not a good showing for Marquayne Mullen. He was all red-faced and red-chested, like he'd had too much to drink the night before and was up too early. He just didn't sound very well-prepared and was not well-spoken. And he also sounds like an idiot when he talks. It's not just the accent. He sounds like a dummy. I said to Lori about it, and not to make everything about race, but like knowing that Cory Booker is coming on in the next segment, who is at the very least, and forgive me for doing a Biden-esque racism here, well-spoken. He starts a sentence and you sort of can see where there was some thought that went into the construction of that sentence, and then he gets to the end and you can see what point he was making. He sounds like an educated human being.
You can tell he's paying attention to what he's saying is one nice thing about when Cory Booker talks. Like, he's hearing what he's saying.
Right. And it's impossible to imagine someone who sounds like Marquayne Mullen coming to power in the Senate while being not white. Like there are, and I said, and this is perhaps unfortunate, there are plenty of dummies or people who sound like dummies in Congress.
Right.
Plenty of black people among them who sound like dummies.
Like that guy who said the island might capsize.
Oh, yeah. Hank Johnson? He was like a local congressman down here.
Although he enunciated, he sounded good when he talked.
Yeah,
it was just
well,
the content of his speech.
The substance of what he was saying was
Right.
batshit
But
crazy.
there are people who sound uneducated when they talk. Marquayne Mullen is among them.
So just to be clear, Senator, do you still believe this was an unjustified and unprovoked attack on Ukraine by Russia?
You know what we believe is this war should have never taken place. And what we're trying to do here is put President Trump in a good position to negotiate the end of the war. It's the same way that Reagan worked with Gorbachev by trying to end the Cold War. Trump is a president that's going to be able to end the killings that should have never taken place and would have never taken place if he would have been in office instead of Joe Biden. The reason why is because President Trump leads peace through strength. What Biden led through is appeasement. And that doesn't work on the world stage. And I do believe 100% that we don't want to back the president or this administration to a corner on saying things that might damage the ability for President Trump to negotiate an end to this war. And President Trump is a deal maker. He will end this war.
Well, and of course,
it's hard to imagine that a non-white could ascend to the United States Senate talking as dumb as Marquayne Mullen sounds when he talks. There are, I'm sure, exceptions to that rule.
Anyway, we're watching the news shows.
We were watching the news shows. Where was I going here?
The proceeding was created with 100% human content.